Hi everybody, this is All Things Cheryl, and basically I'm here with another review and the final episode of Cherish today, which is 8, with the anthology of Ava DuVernay and of course Oprah. Now we know that the anthology, I believe this may be the first anthology that has been introduced to the network. I'm going to say anthology is really good, but sometimes short films can become lengthy. And this is one particular anthology short film I wish that they had made instead of 8 episodes. I wish they had went into at least maybe 9 or maybe 10. And I'll tell you the reason why as we go on. Now the time frame that we're going to deal with right away is in the morning, and that time frame is 10:05. And in 10:05 we see that Gently is preparing the house. She's for the birthday party that she has planned for Miss Luma. Within Gently preparing the house, we see that the new person who has basically taken over Gently's spot or place as far as taking care of Miss Luma is a young fellow. So we see the young fellow is basically chilling, doing what he normally does, and he is putting sugar in Mrs. Luma's tea. And of course, Gently spots that he is doing that. And she says, well, why are you doing this? Miss Luma likes her tea with honey and oranges. This is what, basically I did for Miss Luma, basically. And so you can see that the young fellow was getting ready to be a little bit annoyed. And he was a little bit annoyed. And he asked Gently a question. He asked her, he says, well, how would you feel if someone would come to San Francisco and tell you exactly how to run your podcast? And since it's been a while, and here we do things totally different. And this is when we find out that Evan and Gently has gotten a divorce. This is something that I kind of suspected, but I was hoping that it would not occur. I'll get into it a little bit more. And so Gently, basically took heed, and she took note on it. Now, we still have the cast of characters. We have Gently's best friend, where we find out that her best friend is getting ready to have a baby. She's basically pregnant. And so we see them having conversation, and she's kind of she's upset that the fact that Gently is basically getting ready to relocate. And she's getting ready to relocate in San Francisco. I've never been to San Francisco, but it's going to be very, very interesting for Gently. But I have lived in California. And so she's telling Gently that it's not going to be the same due to her baby won't be able to be delivered naturally. The baby's going to have all kinds of drugs, and she's going to have to be taking all kinds of drugs. And so this is when Gently tells her, look, chill out. You're going to be fine. Just, order a midwife. I forgot what the word basically she used, but the word that she used is for a midwife. And those of you all who may not be familiar with midwives are women who basically are expert in delivering natural birth. It was very, very natural back in the day for midwives actually to deliver majority of the babies. And so she, the best friend was still kind of upset due to the fact that, she will not, be there when she get ready to have her baby. And so this is when we're still in the morning, and we see that Miss Luma basically comes in, and we find out that Miss Luma was not in the house where everybody suspect her to be. And this is when she let them know, the young fellow and Gently, that she was out in the neighborhood doing her things, getting her birthday nails and getting the pedicure and everything. And so they said, okay. And so this is when Miss Luma asked to have some privacy, basically with Gently. And so the young fellow basically left. And so this is when Miss Luma sat down and had a conversation with Gently, and she says to her, this is my birthday and I can basically do whatever I want to, correct? And Gently says, yes, you can. And so this is when Miss Luma goes on and explains to Gently that she misses him. And Gently was like looking complex and say, misses him? And this is when Miss Luma let her know that she really missed Evans. So apparently Evan and Miss Luma basically really, really connected together, and they love being around each other. And so this is when Miss Luma asked Gently, will you have a problem with that? And Gently says no, but Evan is not here. Evan is consulting in Tokyo. And so this is when we find out that Evan is traveling. He has basically made it outside of the United States. He is basically in Tokyo doing consulting work. And so apparently everybody within the circle of Gently has basically stayed connected. And so this is when Miss Luma says he's coming, and he said he would. And so this is when we move from that early 10:05 time frame, and we move into 3:15 time frame, where is that everybody is basically coming to the house, basically dropping off their gifts, getting ready to be prepared for the birthday party. We also see the niece basically in her, apparently, when I said, I think it was in 5 or 6, no, it was in when they were getting ready to 7, that we're not quite sure what type of gender, non-conforming person, but we can see that she's still in somewhat kind of an androgynous person. And an androgynous person is when you are really, really connected with both of your energies, male and female. So you can basically see that in the way she's basically dressing. And so we see the niece, and we see that apparently Gently is still connected with the niece, even though Evan and her are not together. So it's kind of similarity. It's like, even though they are divorced, but they're still connected to the friends and the people that they somewhat bond while they were together as a couple. And so we go on and we see that people are basically coming in, and we see Ben and his girlfriend are basically looking really good. And so this is when Gently noticed that Ben and his queen, as he would call her, is basically dressing somewhat alike. They're dressing somewhat alike. As you guys know, I live in a studio, so you're going to see my studio. And is dressing somewhat alike. And this is when Ben asks her to basically take a picture of them. So she takes about 3 or 4 pictures. And so Then we see Loretta Devine, and Ben basically spots Loretta Devine. And she was very, very famous, and still famous, and still, excuse me, occasionally uh, are in particular films. Lately, she hasn't really been showing up in too many things, but I'm sure if something comes along and she thinks it fits, she will do it. So we go on. Yeah, I have to excuse me. I have allergies, and then I am one of those people who has, like, I have to really be careful. I am an asthmatic person. But anyway, we go on and we see that Ben is having a moment. And the reason why I say that he's having a moment, he has spotted Loretta Devine. And he goes over to Loretta Devine, and he's fanning out. Let me just say, he's fanning out. You know how you fan out and you see one of your people. Like I'm a person for Jill Scott. So if I see Jill Scott, I'm just gonna go berserk. And so anyway, he sees her, and he really, really uh, went over to introduce himself. He said he's Ben, and he lets the Loretta Devine knows how much he likes her and being a star and everything. And then this is when Loretta Devine tests him and asks him, okay, tell me which one of the films that you basically like. And he tells her, and she says, Loretta says, oh, you really is a fan of mine. And so then within that same time frame, which is 3:15, I think I mentioned 3:15, we see that Evan has basically entered. He is on the scene. And everybody is like really surprised and everything to basically see him, because he is no longer around. He's out of the country. He's living in Japan. He's consulting in Japan. And so we see that the both of them, you know how it was in, I believe in, I'm not gonna say, I'm gonna say in episode 5, when they connected again and they saw each other. No, they connected at the art uh, art gallery, and silently they say, they read each other's lips and they say hello to each other from afar. You can see how the camera zoom in on each other, and it pan from Evan and it pans to Gently, and you see how they silently connected together. And so we go on and we go in and we see that, of course, Evan has really stayed connected with, which is very, very interesting, with all of the friends that Gently has basically introduced him while they were connecting and while they were romancing each other and finally got married. We find that out is by way of the recycle god. When they first when they first got together, we saw this recycle guy needing a ride, and Evan gave him a ride in his luxury car. And we find out that Evans basically gave him a job. Now, what type of job Evans gave him, we really don't know what type of job that was, but to know that they're him and his wife is not together, but he is still connected with the people that were very important, not only to Gently, but actually to him too, that was very, very close. And so we move in, and this is when we move in and we see that Ben, let me tell you, Ben is not happy. Actually, if Ben could, he would have basically grabbed Evans up by the collar and slammed him up against a wall or a gate or something if he could. The reason why I say that is because he's very, very upset due to the fact that him and Gently is basically not together. And Ben told Evans, he said, I never thought that you would do this. And apparently what happened was that Evans did not let the village know and Ben know that he was leaving. And this is when a small and yet powerful conversation between and Evan basically came together. And Evan told Ben that it wouldn't work. It couldn't work. We tried, but it just didn't work. And so this is when Ben says, basically, I don't really want to hear it. He just like, I'm done. He was like, he was really upset that Evan and Gently wasn't together, and he felt that, and he thought that he was the guy for Gently, which basically, in my opinion, he really is. And so we go on within that same time frame. I'm hoping that I wrote the time frame here somewhere. When I got into it, I probably let me put my glasses back on. I probably forgot to write the timelines down in the time frames. Um, yeah, we're still in the same time frame, but around 4:15. I'm going to say around 4:15. Around within that 4:15, Gently and Evans finally got around, excuse me, to actually have not a really conversation. It was like bits and pieces. When they connected with each other, they would, have a bit of a conversation here, and then they will go on and go on another way, right? So within that same time frame, then around 4:15, this is when we see Quincy Jones. Basically, Quincy Jones pops in, and everybody is really, really excited that the fact that Quincy Jones is there. But prior or before Quincy Jones, this is when we see how connected that I believe Evan's niece, Gently, and Evan, and the young fellow that Evans hired. We find that the three of them are connected when it came to like black old Hollywood, and they started, especially the niece, started recognizing and saying some of these movies and things that Miss Luma and Quincy basically been in, more so of Miss Quincy, and the young fellow didn't know anything about it, and everybody, the three of them, Gently, Evans, and the niece was like, are you kidding me? You don't know anything about these people, and you don't know who they are. So they casually walked off. Like, wow, I can't believe this. But anyway, we see when Quincy basically came in, they basically had a conversation. They basically sat beside each other. And then we could see that basically through some of the energies, we can see that basically they did at one time had somewhat of a connection. And this is when we hear the little thing that they said is that we've been knowing each other before. I believe they said before electricity came along. I believe it was electricity. I'm not quite sure. But you could tell that they knew each other, not just because of this particular series, uh, but they actually knew each other. And so this is when we find out a little bit more. We find out a little bit more, not too much of Quincy Jones, but we find out that Quincy Jones had, excuse me, my sinuses is really, my allergies is really acting up. We find out that Quincy Jones basically has he has 6 girls. So we find out that he has 6 girls, and they have like a small casual conversation. And so we get into it a little bit more, and we see that before The conversation we see, I'm going to try to fit everybody in. So this may be a little long. My reviews and recaps are long because I want to make sure. We see, I call it the neighborhood bakery woman who basically was bidding to do the wedding cake for Evan and Gently, but never got the chance to do it. Well, we see that she got a chance to make a two-layer uh, cake, a happy birthday cake for Mr. And that cake looked pretty good. It wasn't all that fancy or anything like that, but basically it looked pretty good. Excuse me. It looked pretty good. And so we go on, and then we see that they have basically cut the cake. And then we go on and see that Miss Luma has basically entered. She made her grand entry, as Loretta says that she would do. So she made a grand entry. And of course, I'm moving back and forth. And of course, uh, we find out that Evan and Gently basically really, really do basically care for each other. Um, but like they said, they don't know exactly what went on. And so this is when we find out that, even in my opinion, even though they went to three therapists and no one seemed to work out, but in some sense it did work out, is because when they finally got together and they had some separate time to themselves, this is when they had a open dialogue communication. They talked about Evans went first and said that he felt that he was basically selfish and that he could have done better in basically loving Gently. And Gently also, which was very, very surprising that she would say, did she make a mistake as far as choosing her podcast? And was the podcast the reason why they basically separated? And this is when Gently says that not only uh, Evan says that he was selfish, but Gently also said that she was selfish. In some sense, she was. In some sense, the both of them were. But the point that they were at a point where both of them could acknowledge that the fact that they made a mistake in the marriage. And and this is when we go on. I think we're around 5:15, maybe, yeah, 6:15 time frame, where the party is basically getting ready to basically end. And we find out some interesting things. We find out of that there is a connection going on. And the connection is that the home health aide, I can't even think of the young fellow, uh, and Gently's best friend has basically made a connection. Now, Gently is like, I'm like her. What is going on? And the best friend says, well, we kind of connected. And then this is just, it said, I don't really, really understand this, but really, if it works for you, it's going to work for me. And so basically, the best friend and the home health aide guys, they got together. And so then this is when we see that the niece was on her way home, and she asked her uncle, did he wanted to ride with her to her mother in an Uber? And then she realized how the two of them were looking at each other, so she says, well, never mind, I'll see you tomorrow. And so this is when Gently and Evan was finally by themselves, and she was cleaning up, and Evan says, do you basically need any help? And she basically, as usual, said no. And so this is when he left. And then we see Gently is basically in the house, somewhat by herself, cleaning up. And then she thought that the best friend and the home person came back for something, but then we find out that it was Evans. And so Evan came back and asked her again, do you basically need some assistance? And this is when she said yes. And so this is where we actually see that even though they did have some sense of non, or they didn't really know how to communicate in the early aspect of their marriage, but as they gotten older, that they were able to be able to communicate. And so we see a particular scene where they're acting out some of the old vaudeville music, and they're basically dancing and everything, and they're cleaning up. So after the cleanup and after the dancing, they take off the garbage, and this is when we find out a little bit more about Evan and his mother and the family. The mother and the father really, this is what Gently says. She says, well, finally, your mother was able to get rid of me as far as the divorce was concerned. And then this is when Evan said, no, not really. And then this is when we also find out that the mother is now a preacher. She has, she's gotten her degree, so she's basically became a preacher. And then we find out that the father basically wanted to know that did Evan call Gently, and he told Gently that basically everybody actually liked you, and they really didn't want us to divorce. So this is when we see. The two of them actually sit in front of the house of Miss Luma, and then this is when we see them talking to each other. And Gently says, "Well, what really happened? What really went wrong?" And they both came to the conclusion as that there was no regrets as far as what went on in their relationship, due to the fact that they basically really still love each other, and that they Evan's getting ready to go back to Tokyo, and Jenny says, "Well, we need to get together before and make that happen before you go back to Tokyo." And so they were sitting down, and of course they embraced each other, and of course they had kids. Now that's it of Cherish Today, episode 8, the final anthology of Ava DuVernay and on Oprah's first anthology on the network. Now, I had no idea that they were literally, but in some sense, I did think that they were going to divorce. I thought, and I thought that they would be able to come together, but they divorced. Now, I find it interesting, and then I don't find it interesting that Evan made his way over to Tokyo, and that Gently has been so successful, very successful, where is that she is that girl, that it girl when it comes to podcasting community, that the podcasting community is becoming very big. It's always been big. It's blooming, or whatever the word is, even more. Even I have somewhat of a podcast, but I still need to get some stuff. And we find out that in her getting ready to go to San Francisco, that she has a loft in Oakland. Now, Oakland is in California, is a community that is very, I don't know if it has changed over the year, but Oakland is really where all of the black people, all of the entourage, all of the people in high places hang out, is in Oakland. That she has a loft in Oakland, and that her business, who the company is one of the biggest, she said that there was a bidding war for her. And so, Evan was really, really happy and surprised at the fact that. Now, I always go back to what the guy and why and how I thought that Evan would find his way. He would find his way through technology. And in a sense, he did find his way through technology. He wound up going to Tokyo. And he himself was even he was like surprised as to all of the technology that is in Tokyo. I'm not surprised. I have some friends who live there, hang out. They probably have to come back home because of this corona thing that's basically going on. But in Tokyo, the technology that's in Tokyo is out of this world. When it comes to technological advances in the internet world, Tokyo is the person, I mean, not the person, but is the spot. It's that anything that has to do, pouring glasses, making robots or anything, Tokyo is the spot. Now, I think that uh, Evan found himself. He found himself even to a point where is that he's thinking about, getting another company. Of course, we know he lost his company when he got the board and he lost his company. That's what will happen, especially when you bring in a board. And a board is basically controlling you as to what goes on in your own company that you develop and that you put together yourself. And this is one reason why Gently, had an issue with that, is because his best friend basically didn't think that they needed to have a board and that they wind up losing the board, but losing the company. But anyway, and the fact that Ben was basically upset because he thought, and he still thinks, that Evan is the person for Gently. Now, I enjoyed this Cherish today, although I'm very upset with you, Ava. I understand you did your anthologies and you did your short movies, but sometimes, like this one, I think that this one should have went a little bit more longer, other than 8 episodes, is because I would have loved to see exactly how the non-conformant niece turned out, as far as college is concerned, as far as her education. What direction did she go in? Did she actually pen a label on herself? And we could see that the two of them still loved each other. And I wanted to see, did they make amend? Did they try to make amend and wanted to at least try it one more time? That's what, when you're with a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, you break up, then you come back together. You break up, then you come back together. We never saw this on this anthology, that they break up and then come back together. It would have been good for the final episode where they finally decided, even though they did break up and come back together when they were getting ready to go into the dating aspect. But we didn't see that break up and come back together as being in a marriage. You know how some couples will break up, divorce, and like maybe 5, 15, 10 years along the way, they'll get back together. We never did see that, and I would have loved to see that. But anthologies are very, very good. It's just a fancy word in saying short films. Basically, that's it. But this is All Things Cheryl. I enjoyed it. Please click. If you have some conversation and you want to talk about it, leave it down in the commentary. Until the next time, remember, love is for everyone. And if you're in one of those states where you are being asked to stay in, basically stay in. Remember, they're asking you to stay in and to, take care of yourself. Wash your hands. Wipe off your counters. Wash your clothes. In the back, you see my grocery cart, because I don't know if you all know, but I live in a studio. And I've always lived in a studio all of my life. And I like studio living. Some people don't. Some people don't like that one room kind of sort of. But really, it doesn't really bother me. It doesn't really bother me. It kind of sort of bothered me when I started doing my videos for you all. And I was trying to hide everything. But then I'm kind of the person that I like to be transparent. And I don't like to basically pretend when there really nothing is. I have a nice, cute little studio. So, but anyway, until the next time, remember, love is for everyone, and stay safe out in those streets. Stay off of those streets. If you gotta order your groceries in. Let them deliver to you. That's what I'm getting ready to do. But until the next time, excuse me, and I'm looking for another something else where I can basically review and recap. Queen Sugar and Greenleaf is coming soon. So, like I said, stay off them streets because they're not meant for you right now. Peace and love.